So ladies and gentlemen, we've had some fantastic use cases in the previous session. However, it's especially important to always embrace AI responsibly and work towards ways to mitigate risks involved in the adoption journey. Therefore, in our next panel, we will seek those perspectives on responsibly embracing AI in marketing. We did touch upon it a while back in a couple of our sessions, but let's delve on it further. For our next conversation, let's look at building a fundamental understanding of the responsible use of AI in marketing. As you're aware that AI is still in its initial stage, there is no established code of conduct or legal implications of the content rights, which is why decoding it together calls for a valuable perspective, which we believe that our next set of speakers will be able to provide. So let's talk on a cross-industry view on responsibly embracing AI in marketing. For that, it's indeed my honor to call upon first up our moderator, Prateek Gupta, MMA India board member, founding partner of Zoom India. Joining Prateek would be Deepak Singh, Global Head, AI NLP COE of Mondelez. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us. Gitanjali Bhattacharjee, founder and CEO of Glassbox Ventures. Thank you, Gitanjali. And Varun Shah, managing partner of Publicis Production. Let's give him a big, big round of applause. So well, with that, Prateek, we leave it in the able hands of you to curate the conversation forward with your eminent panelists.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? Okay, I think it's an interesting conversation as she set it up already, saying that everyone is talking about AI like it's been in existence for the last 20 years, but it's only been about 15, 16 months that AI has been around us. Marketing, like everything else, has adopted AI a lot, and it's no longer people going to VCs and saying, this is the Uber of X. Everyone is now saying, this is the AI of Y. So we're already in that area of time when everyone is spending mad amounts of money trying to do everything in an AI format. And if you read enough pitch decks, you'll realize all of it is pretty much hogwash. But here we are trying to discuss how to responsibly go after AI. And we were joking backstage saying that we've not yet responsibly handled advertising, but we will talk about how to responsibly attack AI. But before we get there, I think it's a great set of panelists. Everyone comes from a similar background, but now doing very, very different things. And also using AI, right? Like, it was refreshing to have a conversation where the topic of AI didn't seem like a surface level discovery, but there was in-depth knowledge and understanding of what AI is doing and how it can evolve. Just to set context and just to establish the base, just like to get a quick 2-minute understanding of some use cases that you guys may have implemented using AI in the journeys that you're at, and then we'll quickly get into how to solve it, not solve it, but at least be responsible about it.
So we have been at AI, I think, for a long, long time. And nowadays, we are talking mostly about generative AI, forgetting the elder brother, classical AI and statistical models. But that's where the journey actually starts from. So we have been focused on multiple use cases on the classical AI side, like for audience segmentation, forecasting, targeting, etc. And now I think with generative AI coming in, both on the text and the image side, we are even taking up ambitious projects such as, and we were again talking backstage, how can you create 2D, 3D assets using generative AI to keep the cost of content production low? That's actually a very ambitious area, a project that we have also picked on. And I think on the marketing side of things, the whole value chain, we have something or the other. Some are plug-and-play use cases, some are overall transformation, content optimization, I mean, multiple things. And there's too much to list down. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more later.
I think from our point of view, because it's consulting, there are things that we do for what clients want, and they're using AI for what we want. I think after 20 years of doing things for what clients want, I realized we need to start doing things for what we want. So the first thing that we're doing with what we want is we believe we're trying to take AI as like we spoke backstage, moving away from strategy or making strategic decisions. We believe AI should be working with data that is your own data and coming up, therefore, with ways of solving human problems. So we've right now started talking to certain schools, and we're trying to see the concept of bullying, which is very predominant in schools, and realizing that if one used AI intelligently and married it with facial recognition, there are certain indicators of knowing the early onset of bullying in schools. We are very excited about solving problems like that. So I think the way we as a company are looking at AI is saying that there is this wonderful technology out there, and there are human problems to solve. What are the problems that we can take and start listing down? So this actually came out of a brainstorming session where the 28 years old guys in the office said, there are 10 problems that have come up, right? So that's one thing where I believe as custodians, this is one thing we should be doing a lot more of, saying, let's identify the problems we want solved and then put AI at the center of it, as compared to dancing to the tunes of what marketers believe we should do. But I think on that side of it, because we all need to make some money as well, so we're also doing some interesting work in the healthcare space. So working with healthcare records that are owned by diagnostic companies and seeing how AI can work well. A procurement company of a large multinational has reached out to us, and we're doing some generative AI consulting in that space to say, procurement sits with a lot of data. How do you take that data and today make it predict what should be baselines of the future, putting in inflation, putting in costs? So it's interesting, but I think we're young, so we're learning.
From my perspective, it's a little different, right? A lot of what I do is around production and how we are adopting AI in that space. The big question that I have often is that how are we going to create a balance between right brain and left brain while creating content? And the two spaces that we really drive in this is productivity from the team perspective, and production's extremely diverse, right? And on the other end is a growth accelerator from a creativity perspective. And how do you answer conversations around modular content, scale content, and how do you take that conversation into personalization and localization of that content, right? So a lot of that, so we've obviously done work on with Mondelez on Oreo, where we've ended up delivering about 1.6 million personalized messages. And now we're seeing a lot of it around image, and how do you create closed and open models, and how can we use it in a manner that's ethical and widespread in that sense, right? Without having the concerns around liability and the legalities around it. And it's also, I just feel like AI right now is like walking on eggshells when generative AI is concerned, right? You don't know what you're going to step into, sorry. But yeah, I think it's exciting times. I think AI is here to change a lot of what we do for the long term. So like you said, right, it probably has been around for 7 years, but realistically only 2. And 2 years is very short time if it's going to change a lifetime of what we're going to do ahead.
So I think, like one of the key themes that everyone is talking about, right, is the fact that AI in some form or the way is going to affect every function as we see it today, right? It's going to take care of the baseline statistical prediction of what may happen in lots of cases. But what we forget is what AI calls as LLMs or large language models in that case, is that all of these models are fed in with high amounts of data that are freely and openly available to everyone, right? And one of the key things that seem to come out is the bias that's available in a lot of these data points. Some examples which I've shared with you guys previously as well. Gender bias when it came down to AI being used for recruitment. Bias on skin color when AI was used for diagnostics of certain kinds of ailments that you may find in human beings. And obviously, AI is picking this collective intelligence that we have fed into the internet for now almost 2.5 decades, give or take. And that bias is now causing a majority of the results to move in that direction. How big a problem do you think this is? Because like you said backstage, right, this is one of those technology pieces that we are not only learning but adopting at the same time, right? It's not like we have time to say, okay, we will take 5 years to skill the rest of the world to move in this direction. A lot of the people who don't know where AI is gathering its knowledge, a lot of the people who don't understand how these models work will believe these predictions to be the truth, further coloring the judgment that we are all trying to do away over the last 10 or 15 years very, very strongly. So what do you think is going to happen? What are the kind of things you guys are doing to ensure that this bias doesn't step in?
See, at an enterprise level for us, we are very clear that we need to have a responsible AI policy in place even before we start figuring out what are the use cases, where can we actually implement AI. That has been one of the most important pillars of the AI journey. In addition to this, I think, yes, the bias is everywhere. And again, we were talking backstage that it depends on the data which has gone as the training data set into all the models. And all the training data sets are biased if they are taken as is. Technically, there are certain things that we do to make sure that the bias is reduced. Data pre-processing being one of them, right? Even before starting to train an AI model, making sure that the bias is minimized. It's very difficult to remove it, but minimized. And once we have the AI model in place and we are using it in real life, in live use cases, making sure that we are monitoring the model, something which is called lifecycle management of AI, to make sure that we are monitoring not even the technical aspects of it, but also, for lack of a better word, behavioral aspects of a model. How is it interacting? What kind of bias it has? So these are certain things which become part of any AI model implementation for us. And I've seen this as a best practice elsewhere as well.
But sorry, before you get to Gitanjali, but the reality is that all of us are riding this bicycle, right? How are we going to fix it while we ride it?
That's true. See, the kind of competitive pressure that enterprises are in, no one is going to take a break and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to do things in the right way. We will have to build this spaceship while we are on it. That's how it is. So I won't say that we are fixing the bicycle, but I'll say we are building the spaceship while we are on it.
No, I think there's a great opportunity to have an industry ombudsman, right? Like you had the whole concept of when audits came in or when the idea of compliance came in, it was the same problem, right? To say that everyone was moving at a pace where we didn't know what was the baseline, we didn't know how effectiveness and efficiency went hand in hand. And that's when the industry, I think like most things, right? The pandemic also seems to have emerged out of a chase for something, and then the universe levels itself. I think that's the same thing that happens in the industry. It's also how market mix modeling, when it came in, right? When you started doing MMM initially, and I was part of those days when MMM was new, the way AI is today, it was very clear that you needed to wait for 12 months, right? For that data to have 12 data points to be able to tell you and predict the outcomes. I think it's pretty much the way this industry will now. Probably won't have 12 months, you'll have 12 weeks, but there needs to be, to me, there are two bits to this. One is some of us need to become the custodians of being the industry ombudsman to make sure that compliance and responsible policies are created. And industry bodies like the MMA need to create policies like that. And at the other end, you need to have, like the Triple M policies, you need to have a framework that makes sure you're not spoiling clients and others who are running these models to know that this is for true. Right? And that it will take 12 months to whatever time it takes for the model to learn. And while that happens, the biases get tested and removed. So I think that's my two bits on.
So from a group perspective, firstly, right, we have a central steerco for the group globally. And this is about 65 of us from different aspects of marketing and legal and finance that are really driving this conversation. and any implementation within the group is driven after steerco approval on it, right? So that's one part of it. But more importantly, I just think just on conversation like gender bias, right? We were talking, and all of it is based on past data. There's nothing called present data that is driving it. And refreshing and monitoring present data to drive that conversation is more important than only past data. But because, and like we said, right, test and learn and adaptability is happening simultaneously. We need to be very clear what we are testing and learning and what we are adopting, right? And when we create that bifurcation between the two conversations and that filter, it'll be able to tell us maybe 3 points of 10 is what you're able to adopt, and 7 points are still in a phase of test and learn while we go through that chain. The other thing is the metrics by which we are asking AI or the model to respond to us, right? And those metrics need to be very specific to you, because if you look at a generalized baseline, that bias is always going to creep that into that conversation, right? So it's going to be tricky the next couple of years while we parallelly run everything. But I think in the near future, you could see that taking that toll, right? As we also get smarter on how to toy with these tools.
Yeah, but like, if we were sitting in one of these conferences 2.5, 3 years ago, it would not be AI, but it would be data, right? And everybody would say data is the new oil. Everyone wants to trade in data. Everyone wants to own data. And fundamentally, the generations that have access to the free internet, as we were to call it, have seen a very free, complete, wall-free access to everything on the internet, for good or for bad, right? But with the data being the biggest fuel for these large language models, a large part of this data wall gardens, right, is something that while all of us are saying we'll build these wall gardens, it will become very difficult for these walls to exist, because then the internet is no longer democratized. Like, it's no longer a place which has free flowing information that is going to guide everything that we do today. Like, today you take away the internet, and sometimes when we lose internet in the office, we send people home. What do you do, right? So if today you don't have that structure of free flowing data that governs the way that people are making decisions or doing work, you are living in a very different age, right? So my fear of our conversation is that our conversation is very pragmatic and good to have, but in the rat race that everybody is running in, one person who doesn't fall in line with all of the rules and the systems and the frameworks that you put in is as good as nobody following it, right? And that trap is almost going to be impossible, because today everyone is finding competitive edge. And your ability to make these decisions is your greatest competitive edge.
Honestly, the way I look at my perspective on this is a little different, right? AI is letting you increase productivity, right? We're clear on that, right? And we know that that's going to happen. But now when we're looking at AI from a cognitive space, right? At least in the initial years, it's going to be great from a baseline creation perspective. You'll need to differentiate between what's shared and what's owned, because the uniqueness in marketing communication is going to come from own data that is very specific to these guys, right? And the shared data is only going to help you create that central bridge that you're going to build onto, that baseline that you're going to build onto. And honestly, that's where I think that at least in the near future, that's how we're going to play with it before we start shattering this. But honestly, ultimately, it'll be closed data models in my perspective, and we will decentralize the conversation around data, because in the attempt of being unique, because now you're saying, okay, you can imagine anything and it'll be created. You can want to calculate anything, and that productivity is going to be at a click of a button. Then you're really going to kill skills, right? And then, so that unique, to drive uniqueness, to have that voice, to be able to shatter those barriers, you're going to have that closed data set of yours that you own, that you're going to build on top of these open sources.
No, see, the question regarding whether this is, as you mentioned, that this is not going to be democratized, right? The way current version of web works, those walled gardens already exist, right?
Yeah.
Right from the hardware to the software level. So that I think that issue is sort of already out of our hands. Uh, and the only way we can add value to what we are to the AI models that we are doing is through the only thing that we actually own, which is our own data, right? Because everything else is almost commoditized. Yeah, even your LLMs are going to get commoditized after a while. Yeah, they already are, right? So that's the only thing that. So I will naturally, again, owing to competitive pressures, I will end up using my own data to get that competitive advantage. There is no way to get out of it, right?
No, but I think if you look at, that's a very interesting question, because if you look at this whole thing of the gender bias or the skin color piece, right, that is not about your own data. That is all the images that are out there or all the cues that are out there are coming up with a conclusion that is becoming the universe. And to that point of Prateek saying that itself is a problem, because how do you change that? Because if the input data keeps coming out of the top 20% who are the affluent who have a particular skin tone, how do you change that base and make it more democratized, right? And that has nothing to do with wall gardens in some way. So I think there the question, therefore, is that within our own way of evaluating this, and this needs to be done, right? For example, if you're putting out a campaign that talks about that you went through 1,000 faces or million faces and came up with this, there will have to be a way in which representation is made to be fair. Right? And that is where I think companies in their own right will have to create these models internally to say what are the 5 top biases of the year that we think we should be aware of, right? And that will build over time, because that's the only way one can address this, yeah.
And like a little out of context of what we do, right? But if you read our preamble as a country, right? Like we don't even have the option of saying that we're the second largest. We have the second largest population. We are the largest population in the world today. We also have a growing population versus a declining population in the rest of the world. What seems to be our biggest strength in an age where we are innovating so fast, right? Those blips and those curves. If the first time we got electricity from the 1910s to what we are seeing now, those blips are happening very, very frequently. And with technology advancing at this pace, till the time we settle one technology and the jobs it takes away, we will already have a second technology that we would be absolutely adopting, which brings us to a massive debate that the world is having, right? Which is saying that, will AI take jobs? Yes, AI will take jobs, like a lot of technology advancements have, but then they will replace those jobs with something a lot more specific, right? My fear, being an Indian, is that our biggest competitive advantage right now is that we are producing so much because population, we have the most educated, available workforce to the world. But with AI coming in, is it also our responsibility to see how many jobs we're replacing or not replacing? Googly.
No, I think, see, AI is, and again, I think this is a very cliched statement, but AI is like the calculator came in and the same thing happened, right? So AI will come in. What it is doing currently, and all the enterprises are also able to do it, is automate the transactional work which people were doing. Highly skilled jobs, are still there, they remain. And I think that's the change, that's the transition that AI is going to bring in. It has already started to bring that in. So we have to answer to that as a nation or as a government. I think that's what we need to do to make sure that our people are skilled to be able to perform those jobs, which I think is a good it's a good position to have, right? So yeah, we do need to put in that infrastructure in place, which makes sure that our talent, our labor force has the skills which will be required 10 years, 20 years down the line, rather than focusing on, for example, unskilled jobs, or basically saying that, okay, just because I have people, I have a competitive advantage in front of other nations. So I actually think that's a good problem to solve, and we should solve it. Ideally, we should solve it.
No, I think it's fun because it'll redefine what happened in consulting or the agency world, because performance, for some strange reason, is always being measured in terms of hours of work. right? And that itself defies productivity, because if I'm more productive than he is, I will finish the job faster, but you're going to make me work longer hours so that I can charge you more, right? I think that itself is what AI is turning around and questioning, because that was, I mean, I think it's taking away the dumbness out of our lives in a way where you start putting a logic to the fact that performance is about outcome. So you take people who are driving outcomes in certain areas, make them more productive with technology. And this, like, we use AI for our design experience team. And there's a whole bunch of them who just come in and strategize on the creatives. And there's the new lot who takes those creative thoughts and translates them through to multiple creatives using AI. That doesn't mean that we're just turning out faster amount of work, larger amount, greater volumes of work. It doesn't mean that, I think, in fact, they're getting more intelligent because of their way to use it. But if I put the strategic task of coming up with the creative on AI, then that's a problem. Right? So I think that's where it'll come out. And I'm a great believer that if it's used well for productivity, it'll turn it around.
I think where's ChatGPT when we need it? But in all honesty, right, again, a generic statement, but I really think that it's going to push all of us to upskill ourselves, right? It's going to drive excellence. And just to drill down on what Deepak was saying, I think it's a great problem to have, because now we have the largest population on the world pushing towards being educated and being skilled. Then you have the largest expert workforce in the world thereafter. So I really think that it's a great problem to have. It's just that having the initiative to drive upskilling people is going to be critical. And I don't think that human intervention overall on AI is going to go off in the near future, right? AI is going to do 60% of the job. It's going to get you there faster. But it's going to be your skill set that's going to help you succeed there.
But I must add, as a mother of a 23-year-old, I also think it's making the younger force very arrogant and, with no offense to the younger guys in the room, but not, pushing themselves on strategic thought. And I think that's the fear I have. Right?
And that's the fear that we were discussing, that Sam Altman made in his statement for OpenAI, saying that the efficacy of ChatGPT when it started was 90%, 95%, but 1.5 years later it has come down to 86%, which also proves that the humanity in general is dumb. But
just to add, Prateek, just one point to add. I think while we're talking about this problem, I think what we need to also understand is that when we say upskilling, what are those skills that we're talking about, right? So we're talking about upskilling and reskilling. Reskilling on some of the technical side. But upskilling, I think, renewed focus on things like problem solving, critical reasoning, because if I end up, for everything, if I go to ChatGPT and I never develop that, then that's not going to hold me in good stead in future. So,
but how do you change that? Because that's happening.
And she's absolutely correct, right? Like, we keep having this conversation internally. You see a massive difference between, I don't believe I'm saying this, but us who are going to be a little late adopters of this technology versus the kids, who are using this on an everyday basis. They use it for 0 to 1, right? We may use it for 3 to 5. Yeah. And the 0 to 1 is a lazy input effort, right? Yeah, you give me a question, I am not even going to think about it. What's the point, right? My translation is straight to a keyboard, which is keying in information. And that's just going to make people dumber.
So I have a team member who uses ChatGPT for everything.
Same.
Right? 0 to 1. The challenge is, and I think the person has also understood that, is that the outcome that you get without thinking with AI is not as great as if you spend some time to think and then use the right prompt and then get the outcome. I think that person has now seen it via experience. So the proof is there. And we know that that's the right way. And I think, to your point, we just need to make sure how to go about it.
Yeah, but the problem is they're dumbifying the model, you see.
Yes. Yeah, because in my team, I had someone write a great reason for a long leave, and suddenly I had everyone write a great reason for a long leave. While initially it felt like, oh shit, I need to give this leave to him. I suddenly realized everyone wants the same leave. But I think, again, that brings us back to generalization and refreshing, right? So.
Okay, so I mean, like we had thought right at the beginning, there's going to be no sound conclusion to what we're going to say over here, primarily because, like AI, a lot of what we're trying to do to create the right kind of environments to operate within AI are all work in progress. Everybody that I tend to speak to here, whether it's on the panel or whether it's outside, has great intent towards creating the right kind of frameworks and the right ways of trying to do it. I think the technology is great in its concept and will allow us to become a better race as human beings. But I personally think that without the frameworks or without rules, I don't think that we will be empowered to use the greatness as much as we would be if the rules are in place. So I mean, I'd like to just end the session by asking each one of you, what's the one piece of AI technology that excites you most? Because let's end it on a high versus the morose conversations that we were having. But yeah, and then like we can open up to questions. Can we open up to questions? We can open up to questions, and or we cannot open up to questions. Okay, we cannot open up to questions. Okay, cool. Yeah. So please, what are you most excited about?
See, I'm most excited about the technical part which has made generative AI possible, which is the transformers. Because what I'm seeing now is transformers is a technical element which is being thrown at older AI problems and it is generating huge results. So overall, that actually paints a very rosy picture for future of AI because we are going to solve the unsolved problems that we have had till now. So that's what I am most excited about.
I think for me, it's two things. One is the fact that the hardware that's going to drive the AI is going to become a big game changer. So what you're going to see in the capability of the models to actually, the scale of data at which it processes itself, which is right now becoming a problem, is going to be, the NVIDIAs of the world are going to change that. And I think the next thing I'm excited about is also the moderation that is required within AI to be driven by AI itself, becoming an open source. So what you're finding as the competitors of Twitter X putting out today is a very interesting way in which moderation is going to go. And I find that interesting that if you can democratize it, then the problem itself is solved by the problem. Yeah, so I'm excited about
I
that.
think great point, right? On moderation, Gitanjali. I really think that that's needed. And even in small ways that we're deploying AI, we're seeing that, when you're trying to do large scale out of a single model, moderation is really critical because it's also early stage, right? It's not absolutely stable as models, and how those guardrails come in. But I think more interestingly for me is how are we going to start redefining closed models over open models to start delivering on marketing functions, right? And what is that journey going to be like? Because even for most marketers, the data is general and defining cohorts is actually, there's like a gray area there, right? And then how do you define those walls within the model to deliver to that cohort? And I mean, there's a Seth Godin interview and he said that, if you're trying to deliver to Gen Alpha, actually using the past, you're never going to be able to do that. So then how are you going to do it now using AI?
I think for me, I'll just end it with an example. One piece that I've been seeing for a while is this robot in a field basically goes through with a camera, starts to identify small sectors which are most prone to diseases. Yeah, I'm going. Which are most prone to diseases. Come. And no, I've never
Check.
listened to the teacher also. And basically then starts to generate the pesticide required only in that specific area and spray it. What they realized is that this model was trained outside of India, and obviously the pest attacks that happened inside India were not the same. So they're now retraining the model to just make them understand the diseases that happen here in India, and they want to forward integrate to the creation of the pesticide on the go and only spray it in that area, which I thought was a phenomenal use case.
I think if actually you sat down and asked everyone in the room, for example, to put out 5
Yeah.
use cases,
Easy.
the exciting thing about AI is that.
Yeah.
How do you define the problems that need to be solved, which cannot be solved today, and then put AI at the heart of it? I think that's the best way to look at it, but wonderful.
We're done.
Prateek, just for a great, bit wherein you did ask for certain audience questions, and we did see a lot of enthusiasm amongst the audience. So we're going to be asking them for a couple of questions. In that case,
How the mighty fall.
yes. No, so we're going to give a chance to a couple of our attendees, starting with the man in blue. Your name, please, and to whom you'd like to address.
My name is Kapil Jain. I run a company called Graphito into emerging tech. First question to Deepak. Deepak, you talked about how Mondelez is using responsible AI. Today in the morning session, we had a speaker who talked about that they got access to n number of data. They have everything about their consumer, right? And now you're saying that you are going to have a responsible AI. So how do you define the responsible use of AI in your company, and also what should be the benchmark or the protocols? Secondly, to Prateek, you mentioned about, if this event was supposed to happen like 3 years ago, we were talking about data. Data is new gold. And then you also spoke about jobs, right? So if we talk about India in particular, there were around 2 decades of learning or 3 decades of learning wherein, we became an IT hub. Now, at this stage, when this ChatGPT thing came in like 2 years ago and now everybody's talking about it, what is the pace or the speed at which we need to reskill our country to be job efficient, so to say, and we can catch up with the global competitors, especially China and the US?
So see, responsible AI is a policy framework, and I'll talk not just about Mondelez, I'll talk about overall. So responsible AI is an overall framework that we need to build out. What that contains is how do you mitigate bias? What is your AI policy? Where you will use it? What are the ethics around it? And not just that, like how. So there are certain things which are important from an AI model's perspective. Transparency, interpretability, because if you don't have these, then it's very difficult to find out whether the model is biased or not in an objective fashion. So all of this is listed down to say that this is how I'll go about making sure that my model is transparent, it is interpretable. I'll make sure that, for example, things like content filtering is there, synchronous as well as asynchronous, to make sure that harmful content, toxic content, biased content is not getting generated. So I'm evaluating whatever content is getting generated and making sure it's not there. I also make sure that there are human in the loop at multiple points in time to enable all of this. Now, why it is important is because, see, if you want to embed responsible AI in this whole pipeline, as I mentioned, there are so many things that you need to do. So that means more time and resources, right? A lot of money needs to get spent if you want to use AI responsibly. And an organization has to commit to that, right? Because, they are citizens of the world. They have to commit to that before starting to use AI. Of course, that's not the reality out there. But for Mondelez, that's why we said we'll start out with this framework first and then move to other things. And it's true for a lot of other organizations as well.
I'll very quickly answer your question. Scandalous opinion, but I don't believe that we're very far away for all of us or the entire world to have the same salary that is being pushed out at some point in time. I feel the technology advancements are going to happen at a pace that we've never seen before. It's going to be a lot more unprecedented. So it's not only an India problem, it's a global problem. What has started to happen is that, like Gitanjali said, is that it's increasing productivity. So for the people in the West who were sending a lot of work down to countries like India, like the Philippines, like China, they have now reduced the amount of work that they're sending through, because people are using a lot of these generative AI softwares across the board. So that will be a dampener in the way that our economy progresses, for sure. and the upskilling will be required on the same things that we need to upskill others for, like which is prompt engineering, understanding what these softwares are able to do, and also the ability to take decisions, right? Because I think now everyone is so dependent on the machines that are available to them that they will get scared to make a lot more decisions, whether it's strategic or whether it's just functional. And that's the job that we'll all have to do to move the world in that direction. But I don't believe that we're very far away. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger asked, saying that will he come back? Yeah, 100%, not very far.